Winter is here, and I spend more time inside. And I've been thinking that I don't really think I have a good indoor hobby anymore. In my youth, I loved cooking, drawing, painting, sewing, you name it. And for the past 15 years, I've been crafting. And I turned my passion for crafting into something amazing. JenniferMaker. Teaching others how to make things is one of the greatest joys of my life. But here's the thing. What happens when your hobby becomes your job? Well, suddenly it's no longer your hobby anymore, is it? And that's where I find myself right now. Crafting, creating, it's what I do now, and I love it. But it's also my career. And I've realized I need something more. Those of us who create can let our passion take over everything. And honestly, I think that's kind of amazing. It's what makes us who we are. But when you're always on, when you're constantly pouring yourself into that one thing, well, eventually you can start to feel tapped out. I don't want that to happen to me. That's why I think it's so important to have hobbies. Something that's just for fun, without the pressure of deadlines or expectations. Something that you can just play and experiment with. So, I need a new hobby. I used to love cooking. Experimental food was probably the very first thing I ever actually made intentionally as a kid. I especially loved baking. When I lived in Japan during college, I won a baking contest for an apple spice cake made with miso. Yes, really. They gave me a trophy that I still have. So, why not go back to baking? Well, I used the money our farm earned for its soybean crops this year, and I bought this 100-year-old antique cabinet. It's known as a Hoosier cabinet, and it's what our foremothers used to prepare food before we had things like built-in cabinets in our kitchens. It's kind of a Midwest thing. I think it's so cool. I love how it all opens up and I have so much room to sit and work. It's like a dream box, but for cooking. Today I am making a very easy bread recipe that only needs 4 ingredients and no kneading is required. This is so simple, anyone can make this. I start with 1.5 cups of warm water, ideally between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I stir in 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Then I let it sit and proof for 10 minutes. Next up, get out a big mixing bowl and add 4 cups of flour. I put bread flour in the container that's built into the Hoosier cabinet, and I can just sift the flour right into the measuring cup. I love that. And then add in 2 teaspoons of salt. Mix the flour and salt together. Now, pour in the water and yeast mixture and mix it all together. Then you just cover the bowl and let it sit at room temperature for 2 hours to rise. See how easy that was? After 2 hours, the dough has doubled in size. I put some flour on the Hoosier's work surface using a flour sifter, but sometimes I just spread it around too. Transfer the dough from the bowl to the floured work surface. I folded the dough over onto itself a few times and made a nice little ball. No kneading, remember? Super easy. Just shape it with your hands. It feels good, actually. Then I just covered it again and let the dough rest at room temperature for another 30 minutes. While that's happening, I got out a cast iron pot and lined it with some parchment paper. Then I preheated my oven to 430 degrees Fahrenheit, and I put the pot inside to warm up with the oven. After 30 minutes, I took out the hot pot carefully and transferred the dough inside. I also meant to score the top, but I forgot. Oh well, that's the great thing about doing something just for fun. It'll still be fine even if I don't score it. I put the lid back on, put the pot back in the oven, and I baked the bread for 30 minutes. Then I removed the lid, baked it for another 15 minutes to get that golden brown crust. It's just so pretty. I love this bread. Easy peasy. While the bread was cooling, I decided we also needed some homemade butter. My daughter Alexa used to love making butter by hand, only back then we just shook up the whipping cream in a mason jar. Really easy for a kid to do. This time, I decided to get a proper butter churn with a dasher and see how that works. The whipping cream should be at room temperature so it doesn't take too long to turn into butter. Mine was taking a while, however, so I asked Greg to help while I worked on dinner that evening. Of course, in true Greg fashion, he decided he could do it one better and got out his drill to turn the handle instead.
It was perfect, right?
But it worked. Our cream separated out into buttermilk and butter really fast. It's awesome. Then I just drained the buttermilk and rinsed the butter really well with cold water. And then I put our fresh butter into crocks. It should last for a few weeks in the refrigerator. Fresh bread and butter is amazing. Perfect for a new home, too, by the way, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bake bread. We had it that night with dinner, and it was delicious. So maybe I'll do some more baking, but it's for fun, so no pressure, right? I will say that I'm already thinking about new recipes that I might want to try. Have you ever heard of Johnny cakes? I think they would taste delicious with my chili that I make with pumpkins and cocoa powder. Having something to look forward to like this is a huge deal to me, and I bet it is for you too. Hobbies are such a great way to let go of stress, to play, to experiment, to make mistakes, and to learn, without any more pressure than we put on ourselves. I always give myself permission to make all of the mistakes, and I think that you should too. So what if my bread hadn't turned out quite right? I can always try again. Flour, water, salt, and yeast really don't cost that much. Really, it's more about the journey, less about the finished product. The same is true of crafting, because you could just buy that thing or have someone make it for you or get it on Etsy, right? But the act of making something yourself in the way that you want is what's really important. Knowing that this thing is made with your hands and heart is so fulfilling. So, what's your hobby? What do you want to do with your free time? I'd love for you to let me know. Tell me in the comments. Share your ideas. Tell me what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you. But I think what's really important is that you have a hobby. I don't care what it is. You just have to have something that isn't just for work, right? You have to have something that is just playtime and where you keep your expectations low and your focus is on doing the thing less than the finished product, in my opinion. Once it becomes more about the finished product, then we're getting into like job territory. Let's be honest, right? And then all of the pressures and expectations get weighed on us, and it gets so much harder. So if you don't have a hobby right now, consider this your sign to find one. In the meantime, I'm going to be thinking of new recipes that I can make this winter.